This week, I read The Gilded 6 Bits by Zora, Neale Hurston. This was first published in 1933, and it is located in Eatonville, Florida. That's where this whole story goes down. I want to share with you who the characters are before I share with you what happens. I do want to say that there are spoiler alerts in this, and we will start out with the characters, of course. The main characters are Joe Banks, who is a husband who works and takes care of his wife. And there's also his wife, whose name is Missie May Banks, who is a young African-American housewife, and her husband as well is African-American. Now, the next character is Otis D. Slimmons, who is a traveling salesman or businessman, I should say. But there's also some mention of another character who I don't remember her having a name, but Joe Banks' mama is mentioned in this story, and she plays a vital role in some facts. But let's just start out with how this story starts out. It starts out with this couple, Missie May Banks and her husband, Joe, and you kind of get introduction into how this couple plays and that I don't even want to just say at the new stage of love, but just really loving each other and being excited about seeing each other again. They have this ritual where whenever Joe comes home from working at a fertilizer plant, he tosses money in the coin form at his wife. And they just go back and forth and joke, and they just banter with each other. And it really does help you get an idea that this couple cares about each other and they have rituals with each other. This particular night, this ritual seems to be shifted because Joe wants to take his wife out and show her out on the town. Now, this is also where we get introduced to the character Otis D. Slimmons, who is someone who owns a new ice cream parlor. And so Joe Banks is telling his wife, Missie May, baby, I want to take you into town. I want to show you off to this new business owner. I also want to show you off to everybody in the town. I want you to be the first woman to get into this ice cream parlor and get some ice cream. Joe Banks seems so enamored and inspired at some points by this Otis D. Slimmons guy. He goes on to share how much money this man has said that he has, how many women love him wherever he goes. He just starts sharing stories about him and this man meeting each other and learning of how powerful he is. Joe Banks points out how much gold Otis D. Slimmons has, and he shares all this with Missie May. Missie May at first wasn't aware of this new ice cream parlor. So she was like, what? But she did mention seeing a new man in town, how she went to go buy something at the store. She said some lies, so I think that's what they maybe used to wash clothes. But she said, yeah, I went into town and I did see a new man, and you are gassing this man up. She goes on to share, I went to go buy something from the store, this lie, and I did see him, and he also waved at her in some way or said something to her. They had an interaction where he let it be known, I see you, hello, or that he's new in town in some kind of way. This is where I really get to see a little bit more of Joe Banks' character. There's a lot of insecurity that shows up in how Joe Banks sees his body and how he sees money. He shares how Otis D. Slimmons is so big and round and has a big belly in response to May Banks saying he's fat. Why are you gassing him up so much? He's not attractive. No woman wants to be with a man with a big old belly. But Joe Banks goes on to say, excuse me. When I look at all these images of these wealthy men, these wealthy white men in the 1930s, I guess at that time, they have big bellies. This is a sign that this man, Otis D. Slimmons, got money. And he also told me all the ladies love him. He was literally like LL Cool J, I guess. But the wife wasn't having it, and they end up going out. They do go to the parlor, the ice cream parlor, to enjoy some of the ice cream. And they do run into Otis D. Slimmons, where they're able to see some of the things that Joe Banks had been talking about. This is where you kind of see where Joe is overly excited about Otis D. Slimmons. And I think this is where the wife starts to get some clarity around what this man does have, because he does seem to display what he has a lot. He has gold teeth, he has gold chains, or just a lot of different gold jewelry. It may not be chains, but I definitely do remember there being a lot of connections to gold-plated money. And so that's where this conversation about, or this situation with them going to this ice cream parlor pretty much ends. And you get back into this normal routine in the story where Joe Banks is heading home and wanting to be with his wife. That introduction we got into this couple who's flirting with each other, passionate, that introduction to them was also filled with a lot of beautiful imagery from Zora Neale Hurston describing passion and intimacy. But then it shifts to him wanting to shift that routine. He usually, I'm assuming, comes through the front and throws those coins so that his wife can come out and greet him. But this time he wanted to go through the back, and it was also showing even a deeper thoughtfulness that this man, who the day before was showing a little bit of insecurity. This man's more wealthy, more women like him. But he thought, today I'm not going to come through the front door and toss those coins like I usually do. I'm going to clean myself up and make her routine easier. So he enters the home through the back. And when he does enter through the back, he recognizes that something's off in the house. He kind of crashes into something and he notices that there's an intruder. And so he's going in to try to protect his wife. And he finds his wife, Missie Mae Banks, in bed or in a compromising situation with Otis D. Slimmons. And he goes after him, especially after he recognizes that there's something funky going on up in here. And he attacks him. He hits him in some way and snatches some of his gold contents. I believe it's a necklace or some of the coins. And this is where you start to see this beautiful couple who are in love with each other. They're young, a wife who's defending her husband, saying that man is fat, no woman wants him, to her saying, listen, I just wanted to get some of those coins for you. And he wouldn't leave me alone. And this is where I start to fall in love with Zora Neale Hurston's writing, because the way she described this moment for Joe Banks, as well as Missie Mae Banks, is what many people experience, not just in relationships. The way that she described the darkness in the house that they felt because of this experience is what many people may feel when they're a kid and your mom's coming home, you're in trouble, maybe you're grounded. She described it so beautifully. So what happens next is Joe is sad. He's down and out, and she's also sad. There's just a lot of avoiding conversations. She cooks for him. He goes away to his mom's. He comes back and forth, and then they finally do connect. They are able to be intimate with each other and connect or whatever. But when she wakes up the next morning after this encounter where they've been in a limbo, does he forgive her? There was a really interesting note in it where she said, I'm not leaving him. He's going to have to be the one to leave me, because there's also suggestions that the character I mentioned to you all earlier, the mother of Joe Banks, she knew the mom didn't like her. And so when he's visiting his mom, she's showing up, I believe. I may be mistaken about that, but there's interactions where there's heat, and when they were fighting and not really, I don't want to say fighting, but where they were disconnected, where he was with his mother or she was worried that he may be with his mama, who already don't like me. And so when she wakes up after this encounter where she thinks, okay, finally we're reconciled. He's not going to his mama's house all the time. He's not ignoring me, because she would make him food. But then that coin that he snatched from Otis D. Slimmons would pop up randomly. When they finally were able to be intimate, when she wakes up, under her pillow was some of the gold that Joe Banks snatched off of Otis D. Slimmons after he found him in his home. So remember, there was this little tussle that went down, and he grabbed something on his way out, because Otis D. Slimmons also was really like, don't kill me, don't hurt me, please don't attack me, I'll give you anything you want. And Joe Banks just snatched some of that gold from him wherever it was placed. And that same gold was found under Missie Mae Banks' pillow, making her feel, oh no, we really didn't get over this slump, this infidelity, this cheating. We didn't get over it. But also, there is this really sad moment where I start to remember the day that Joe Banks came home and found his wife with Otis D. Slimmons. He was driving home and saying, I can't wait to be home with my Missie Mae Banks. I think it's time for us to have a baby. And so after this encounter of them being intimate and her finding the coins or the gold from Otis D. Slimmons under her pillow, she soon finds out she's pregnant. And this is where the mother comes in a little bit more, because Joe Banks was still distant. Okay, you pregnant, but we got some darkness. That darkness that Zora Neale Hurston wrote about that shifted the home, it was still there despite her being pregnant. And I'm assuming it's because there was some assumption, was the baby his? Was it not? Because when the baby is finally born, this mother, who, Joe Banks' mother, made it very clear. I didn't really want you to marry that girl, but you have a beautiful son. She gave birth to a son. I guess Joe Banks has a little relief about that. The mother confirms the baby looks just like you. She said, you can never deny that baby is yours. And she also noted, I really didn't want you to marry that girl. Confirming what Missie Mae was thinking earlier. The mother-in-law, Joe Banks' mother, said, I never wanted you to marry her because her mama was dragging her feet, or her mama was fast, or her mama was known to be a little out there. But that baby is yours. And so Joe Banks left and he went into town, into a store, and he wanted to buy some candy. And he hands the clerk this coin. And the clerk was like, where did you get this gold from? Now, remember, this is based in Eatonville, Florida, where at the time, I'm assuming this is an all-black town. I think the clerk person may be a white person. I may be wrong. But the clerk says, where'd you get this gold from? And he says, I'm going to tell you where I got this gold from. Okay, this is where all that praising he had for Otis D. Slimmons comes to an opportunity for him to finally name this dude as a fraud. Because what they found was that gold that he snatched from Otis D. Slimmons was fake. He knew it was fake when he found it after he grabbed it from him. And then after the wife found it under her pillow, she also realized it was fake. So remember, she wanted to get this gold in order to, at least that's what she said, to give it to her husband. Because, of course, when he came home, he was a little enamored with Otis D. Slimmons, what it looked like he had, and his gold teeth, and all the things he had, and the stories he was sharing about his travels. And so the moment that clerk, who he was buying some candies from, mentioned, where'd you get this gold from? He says, it's fake. There's this man who came into town talking all this rah-rah about how much money he got. And turns out all the gold he had was fake. He had painted it to try to make other people think he had a lot. And so he goes on to say, I want to buy some molasses candy, some molasses kisses. And the clerk says, you have enough money here to buy more than just that. And he says, no, I need those molasses candies because I got a baby. I just had a baby. And the baby can eat on a little of that or suck on that because it's small enough. I don't want chocolate because the baby probably can't chew it. But the baby will be able to taste a little of that sweetness from the molasses candy. And so he buys that and he goes home. And this is what I forgot to mention in the beginning. When he came home, he would always have the coins that he would toss at his wife. And he also would have molasses candies in his pocket. So that like back and forth I was mentioning earlier where they were flirting, and it just showed the energy of a very beautiful newlywed young couple, excited and passionate about each other. She would pick up the coins that he left for her, and he would hide some candies in his pocket saying, you can't have none of this molasses candy. You too sweet. And so when he finally got confirmation that the baby was his, he went and bought a whole bunch of molasses candy with the money he snatched off the neck of that lion Otis D. Slimmons and brought it back to his wife, who I don't want to say she was lying, but she wasn't, I don't know. She cheated on him, but he brought the molasses candies home to her. And that is where the story ends. this idea that Joe forgave Miss May and that it was forgotten. This person he was boasting a lot about soon became the person he shamed and also got a little bit of restoration in his relationship with his wife. Now I want to go through some of my thoughts on this. This person who he thought so much of soon became the person he had to see for a fraud. And it relates to what the book is called. The ending of this story is really powerful with the coins because the Gilded 6 Bits title is like a metaphor about deceptiveness of appearances and the superficial way in which we could be drawn into people based on what it looks like they have. I really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed how short it was. I read this in the sauna, sweating up a storm, and it was amazing because one, it tells the story of relationships through the thoughts of someone who I admire as a writer, who is one of my mentors as a writer. I really like to follow her. She's also a huge part of my doctoral research that I completed. She is like a really huge part of inspiration because she's an anthropologist and she researched a lot of African American and African beliefs throughout the Caribbean and the South. And so I wanted to bring it back to where this story is based. And so this is sort of my analysis section now, where Zora Neale Hurston is from Eatonville, Florida, which is an all-Black town. And I always wonder, like, when I read her mentioning Black towns or parts that seem similar to her life and her writings, where did she get this story? Did she see someone as a young woman go through this? Did she experience this experience? Because I think she was married about 3 times. But Zora Neale Hurston is very powerful in the way she writes. Maybe 10 years ago, when I first picked up one of her books, it was hard to get through the dialects. And I did hear other people share their similar experiences of just reading the ways in which she makes sure to preserve dialects from the South. She's an anthropologist. So that's where I get my inspiration from her as a researcher, but also this was one of the times where I was reading those dialects, and I've gotten into her work over the years deeply. So that first introduction, just as a new grad student, was hard because I had never read Southern voices be written and depicted the way that she did. And I'm so happy she did that because looking back on something written in 1933, as someone who loves my grandmothers, who loves to read these types of stories to get an idea of the things my grandmothers were eating and doing, her writing that way is super helpful. And so you see the husband and wife's devotion in this story through the dialect of the way Zora Neale Hurston thought that these people talked or should have talked. Something that I really, really wanted to point out is the mother in this story. She really wanted to make it clear, I do not trust this girl. And it was clear because the daughter-in-law said that, like, he's probably with his mom. She never liked me anyway. And I just love how the introduction to the story of him tossing her candies and them fighting over them in this playful, romantic way before they eat dinner was also what kind of reconciled them as a couple. Now, I'm in school right now, and I thought instantly of an article I read this week for one of my classes, where it just talked about men and women's body image and the ways in which they see their sexual attractiveness or their attractiveness to the opposite sex or their attracted gender, that their body image plays a huge role in their ability to see and feel attracted physically. And so hearing how Zora Neale Hurston wrote deeply about Joe Banks and how he thought about his body, like, I want to have a big belly because it shows that I'm rich. And his wife was saying, I love your body. And he looked down at his flat stomach saying, like, no, we're not going to shame anybody, any spectrum. But it is interesting to me, and I did want to point that out, that the article that I read really made it clear how different these perspectives are on gender and how much more research was needed on how men perceive themselves and their bodies. And so I love that she put that in there because we read so many stories about women who are heartbroken and how they think about their bodies. And how the world projects things on them. And she did a beautiful job at laying out the darkness you felt in the house when he found his wife with another man, particularly the man he said, I can't measure up to. I don't got as much money or the big belly to show that I got the money. So now I'm just looking over my notes on things I wrote down. And I wrote down, do we have more compassion on males who are cheated on than we do on women who are cheated on? I often hear, especially growing up in the church, where if women were going through things in their relationship, you'll hear sometimes people say things, did you submit enough? Were you kind enough? Or you'll even see it online when celebrities or popular people who are women come out and say or share that they've been cheated on. I think we recently saw something like that with the rapper Megan Thee Stallion, where people will point out things and say, well, were you submissive enough? Were you kind enough? Maybe he wasn't attracted to you. Maybe you let yourself go. And I wonder if when many of us first read this, were we thinking that at all? Was she not satisfied financially? Was she not satisfied physically? It just brings in that conversation of gender and how we look at heartbreak, because this was one of the first stories I think I've ever read where the breakdown of a relationship and infidelity is caused by a woman. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It definitely does. And so I'm really thankful for the article I read on connection and attraction and how it differs for genders. But I think that Zora wrote the confrontation scene really beautifully. I have to stress it. I have to stress how it felt like when you know your mama or daddy is coming home and the house just feels different. You know your mama disappointed in you. And it may have felt that way because as a woman, you're bred to think, oh, he's going through it, have a lot of compassion for a man. Whereas for a woman, it's just so normalized that heartbreak is a thing. The other part that was beautiful is that Zora Neale Hurston gets to the point. She is helping me so much. She got straight to the point in a way where you could fill in the blanks to what could have happened and left wanting more. I feel that way when I read James Baldwin often, and her short stories are just a great way to stretch my brain. I did also want to point out that article I read in my class about gender really did point out to me some things about the wife. How the wife made it very clear that women don't like men who look like that. We care about this, or that. You're a good man, Joe. And she still saw a benefit or something that she could gain, even for her husband, in being with the very body type and person that she shamed. I will link the article below if you guys are interested in being able to find the article. I'm not sure if it's online for free. It was provided to me from my professor, so I'll look into if I can share links if I find them. But let me know if you're interested in that. I don't know. I think Zora Neale Hurston did a really good job at not shaming the wife or glorifying the husband. She left so much room for understanding the possibilities of redemption in relationships in a way that we often see women doing. She also did great with the idea of turning the other cheek, but leaving room for heartache and the shame that some men and just women in general carry when it comes to being disappointed, being heartbroken, and the complex world of when you're hurt, what does that also mean to your body image when it's in the romantic relationships? Because he was also very vulnerable with her. Like when you read the beginning and the things he was saying, he was showing his naiveness around people, his mind frame. He wasn't very old either, not aware when someone's just lying and gas and stuff, but also his own insecurities in his body as a man. So it's like this idea of wealth having a huge perspective for men in this story, at least how Zora wrote it, with their worthiness, their attractiveness. And so this made me think of that article so much because the article ended with them saying we have to do more research on the way that men view themselves and la-di-da-di-da-di. The last 2 points I wanted to make was the part where I said that Zora Neale Hurston did a great job at writing the darkness that the husband and the wife felt in this story after they found Otis in there with the wife. he had said something to her where he heard her crying after he pushed the Otis out of the house and stole the coins from him. He said, "What you crying for? You crying because I love you and you don't love me?" I was like, oh my gosh. I just felt so bad for him. I felt so bad for him. It reminded me of them old school Destiny Child albums that you listen to when you're a kid and you ain't ever been through nothing. Or something you hear your mama playing over and over when she going through something. But hearing it from the man's perspective was just, it was interesting. It was really, really interesting. It reminds me also that scene in the book where he's like, "What you crying about, May? Cause you crying because I love you and you don't love me? What the heck? What they gotta do?" It was a little shade, but also pity. Like you could, it was just, he was trying to figure out how to process this experience. But that specific scene reminded me of Baby Boy. Like I have to always, I'm just, looking at these experiences and gender. But y'all remember in Baby Boy do y'all remember in Baby Boy where Yvette was like, "Jody don't love me no more"? That scene in the book felt like that. When he said, "What you crying for? Because you don't love me and I love you." Because we all who've seen Baby Boy remember that scene. Even if the movie is deep and also has some funny moments that we remember and was always coming on TV, it seems like all the time, there is this moment where you see, oh wow, Yvette is really heartbroken. Like, especially because I think when that movie came out, I was a kid. So there's certain experiences that you watch in movies as a kid, and then you hear your friend go through it or you go through it and you understand those tears. And reading this, I think if a young man, a young woman read it, if they looped around life's journey to experience that pain, I think they'll finally be able to see like, wow, that thing I read or witnessed, I now have an understanding of why it was so emotionally triggering for me. I remember hearing Yvette crying, "Jody don't love me no more." I didn't know nothing about no Jody or no man or nothing even loving you or relationship drama beyond just seeing things on TV. But I knew this is real and this must be what a lot of people go through. And so I wonder, now that I've done my review, I want to go listen to other people's reviews and look at men's and women's experiences with it because it was dope. I don't know. It was really dope. The last point I want to make is, I think I said it, but I thought it was really dope. There was this really dope moment where that darkness I said Zora Neale Hurston wrote very well shows up, and Joe goes to his mom's house, or he's busy at work, not really coming home to Missie May a lot. And she says, "I'm going to keep showing up as your wife. I know I messed up." And this is kind of my like rewording what she said. But she's like, "You gonna have to leave me, boy." Like, she's like, "I'm not going to stop showing up. I don't care if I got to be embarrassed in front of his mama. I don't care how long I have to wait. You got to leave me. I'm not leaving." It reminded me of, and I can't help but keep comparing it to things I've seen before, but you'll watch a movie where a man messes up or a relationship doesn't go well, and the man's like, "I ain't leaving you, girl. I'm not stopping. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do what I got to do." So it was really dope to see one of my sisters, and she's like, "I ain't about to lose my family." I love this. It was the perfect read for the sauna, and I was yapping about it all night, and I definitely felt inspired as a writer. Now, I wanted to share with you all the short recipe that I got from this book and was able to veganize. Zora Neale Hurston writes about a lot of different food, and the few things I've read from her, I have not read everything, but I always enjoy when she and many writers from the South or who come from Southern parents write about the food, the culture, gardening, those things. I love that because it makes me think maybe my grandmothers were eating these things, doing these things, listening to this music. And so she had a lot of things that I could veganize in it that I might come back to if I have more thoughts on this book, or this short story. The one thing that I made from this book was the molasses kisses. And I did that because Joe came home with those in the beginning of the story, and they were in his pocket. And after he tossed the coins at her, they would wrestle and she'd get some from him. And it also is the very thing at the end of the book the end of the story that he used to bring reconciliation to the relationship. He brought his wife and the baby some of those molasses kisses. And so I hurried up and bought a few of those items the moment I finished reading it. I bought some vegan butter and I also bought some sugar. I already had molasses, but I ended up buying another bottle of molasses because I wasn't sure if my molasses needed to be super, super fresh. Okay. The molasses I have is in my herbalism space, not something that we necessarily use in too much cooking, but I bought some new molasses and I hope you can see on the screen me making it now. I was able to look up people who have been preserving recipes who I've already seen on my timeline a long time ago. They've already made it. So I want to shout out the woman who I watched her make it to help veganize it for myself. And so I think there's also vinegar involved in it, but I'll make sure to insert the images of the creator, links to her, for those of you who want to see some more of the history of it. But I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed making this, and I'm going to wait and share my review of it because I haven't made it yet. I'm just talking about it now. So just about right now, I should be able to insert what I thought about the molasses. And if I failed at it, this is just a beforehand because I haven't tried it making it yet, that if I end up failing at making this, I am definitely going to buy some of the molasses candy online because I just found out, hopefully if I can find it vegan, that a lot of that candy that we used to hate as kids is actual candy that is mentioned in this book. I think some of those really nasty peanut buttery candies that we hated as kids during Halloween, that's molasses candy. That's a variation of it. But a lot of our ancestors made it themselves. Also bought it from local candy stores like Joe did. So I might be a little off in these measurements, so don't take my word for it. I will link the video I watched that showed me how to make a rendition of this. I will also link the recipe that the person linked in their comments. But I believe that this was 1 cup of white sugar, 1 cup of molasses, 1 tablespoon of plant-based butter, and 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. There also is some salt. I didn't add my salt until a little bit later, and you will see that. But I will say this was really fun. I often share with you guys that I'm a child of Black Southern migrants. I'm the first child in my entire lineage of family that was born in California. My mom is from Mississippi by way of most of the people who were born in her family in the U.S., as well as my father, who is from Louisiana. And it's very similar for him as well, where they all come from the same small town for most of, or same areas in Louisiana or Mississippi for generations. And I grew up watching a lot of my mom's friends or aunts making candy at events. Most of these people are Southern migrants. All of them, for the most part, are Southern migrants, come from Mississippi, come from Louisiana. And I remember being in the kitchen with them while they were making different toffees and candies with nuts. And I remember even one of my cousins hurting themselves from making candy or something like that. It's just a big tradition in my family that I've never participated in myself beyond eating it as a kid. And I have a lot of memories of this growing up in the 90s. And so you see me just cooking down the molasses and the sugar together. I added the salt. You may have saw that a moment ago. But I want to name, we don't use white sugar in our house. We usually just use maple sugar. I prefer the flavor. And so going forward, if I ever make this, I'm definitely using maple sugar. Another thing I want to note is I'm testing out if it's done because I don't have the little heat monitor that people use when they are preparing food like this or cooking candy. So the woman who gave me the recipe, or the woman's recipe I used, she said just use some cool water to drop some of the liquid that you're cooking into the water to see if it's done. And I figured it was kind of done. I may have overcooked it a little bit, but I think it was fine. I definitely let it sit too long, but it was still able to be stretched. And I'm gonna be honest, this, when I was tasting it, because we do use molasses, we use molasses when we make sweet potatoes. It gives sweet potatoes mixed with maple sugar a really beautiful texture because maple sugar already has a very powerful flavor. And so, as I said, I'm definitely using maple sugar if I ever make this again. But also, if you were a kid, do you remember if you had a teacher and they would give you C's candy, those lollipops, like the caramel ones or the coffee ones? This is what it reminds me of because molasses has a very deep flavor. That's what I thought. And I definitely, if I ever make this again with maple sugar, I'm going to be mixing in coffee so that I can maybe give it to some elders, maybe make a sugar-free one for people who can't have a lot of sugar so that they can get that sort of rendition or my recipe on that C's chocolate candy, because it does in a lot of ways taste like that. Because right here I'm just pulling the molasses, because the recipe I found was a person pulling it, and I decided to put it on the parchment paper so it doesn't stick together because it's still slightly warm here. I think and definitely know I overcooked mine, but I do like it. Some of the texture is chewy, some of it is hard like rock candy, which I like. And I think just taking some of that, throwing it in coffee, throwing it into a baking sheet with some sweet potatoes, how I usually make sweet potatoes with maple sugar and molasses. This candy that I made, or molasses kisses, is going to be used a lot because I have lots of sweet potatoes that we have stored. And I also think this will be good in coffee. I can imagine having a cup of coffee, and I drink coffee probably once a month. During a certain time of the month, I just crave it. And I can see grabbing one of these and stirring it into a coffee or a tea or baked goods, or even just reheating it and melting it down to add to sweet potatoes. And so I really enjoyed this, and I also got really creative and wanted to not waste the parchment paper. So I started wrapping some of them as I would have imagined it would have been in this book that I got the idea from. I imagine Joe Banks going to get some of these candies, and maybe the shop where he buys them from makes them in shop, and they roll them for the kids or the people who buy them. And I could just imagine Joe Banks having some of these in his pocket where his wife is looking for them. And as we know, that is how they symbolized or showed, or at least Zora showed, their reconciliation, was through him offering her some of them molasses kisses. And so that was my little way of putting a little cute twist on it. I'm not wrapping all of those. I'm not doing all that. But I thought it would be cute for this video. And I like them. I don't dislike the taste of molasses. I won't eat them on their own because it's a lot of sugar for just the teeth. I had braces before, and so I just try to stay away from having too much stuff that sticks to my teeth. But throwing it in a coffee, some tea, in a baked sweet potato that you put in the oven or in the air fryer with a little vegan butter, it is going to be amazing because I already use it on my sweet potatoes. So I think when I have my next recipe, which one of the recipes in this book that Missie made was some sweet potato. She made like a sweet potato casserole or a sweet potato penne or something. And so I might use some of these kisses in another recipe from that book and as the sweetener to it, because that is a African-American, also Caribbean inspired sweet potato dish. And I'm assuming they use sugar, and I would just replace it with these. But yeah, that is the recipe. So that's what I got from this book. That's what I was able to veganize and make. That's what I was able to make from this book, learn from this book, thought about this book. And the one thing I'm taking from this book as a writer is the ability to just get to the point, but also the ability to bring stories to people that they maybe never considered. I think because so much of my work is grounded and my research is grounded in women, it does really encourage me as a writer to not just test boundaries, but stretch myself in some of my perspectives, my own biases. And it just was funny, even as I'm thinking about it, like the guy coming into town and the husband just gassing him up, and he was trying to get with your wife. I also want to name, I thought it was a little sneaky, little Miss May, when she said, oh, I already saw him in town and he is not all that. I don't know. I didn't go into too much of the shade of what Miss May did, because you deserve to be just as shamed as we shame other people who commit things of this nature, you know. But this is why you stay out married people business, couples business, relationships, because it ain't your business. You really don't know. And also why you shouldn't judge people as couple goals, because and maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. Is it couple goals to get over humps? Is it couple goals to forgive? Because I do know there was like someone I recently saw online who really came out publicly about her partner having a baby with someone. And everybody was like, you better leave, you better leave. And I know when religion comes in there was conversation she was having with that, where am I supposed to turn the other cheek? And some religious people were like, hey, you get to leave if things like this happen according to our religion. And I think the person ended up leaving. But it makes me think, with gender in this story, with it being Joe, the one who got cheated on, do we give women the same grace? Do we give men the same grace when they take the cheater back? Are men shamed for taking a cheating wife back? Are women shamed? And then you have to think about the other perspectives of people who do not follow heterosexual norms, who do not fall into marriages that are heterosexual. And so that's what I'm excited about, reading more books from writers who are bringing in different perspectives on all aspects of life. And the way I picked this short story was I just have a bunch of books with short stories from Zora Neale Hurston, and I just opened it, and the first one I found is where I started. And this is the first one I started in that book. And I cannot wait to come back with not only more reviews and analysis, summaries, but also more recipes that I can veganize, because I have enjoyed making the cooking videos with you guys, but I got to make sure I'm still nerding out and enjoying the things I love doing, because I'm back in my courses and this is helping me finish. And I appreciate those of you who have gone on this journey with me, both with the recipes and with this shift into reviewing books and more. I'll talk to you guys next week.